are watching In the Cool of the Day, and I am your host, Tia Young. Our special guest today is no stranger to our studios. Please welcome Dr. Negleatha Johnson, founder of Life Waters Ministries International. Hello, Dr. Johnson. How are you?
I'm doing well. What about you, Tia?
I'm doing great. It's so good to see you again.
Good to be here.
I know this is your first taping with In the Cool of the Day.
Exactly.
But you've been on Rock Your Block.
Yes,
and
indeed.
You've been on other FPA presentations.
That's
so
right.
we're glad to have you here today. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get started. Since you are new to In the Cool of the Day, just kind of bring us up to speed on Life Waters Ministries International.
Okay.
And the people you serve.
All right. This ministry is a ministry that my husband Jimmy and I started in 1996, about 17 years ago in June, this coming June. And it started basically as a ministry of music. And over time, we branched out and started hosting retreats and hosting conferences and doing speaking and things of that nature. We also host our Single But Not Alone retreat, which you're familiar with. We just had that this past March.
Wow.
And that's for single Christian women who are just trying to understand what it means to be single in this time. And we try to reach out to those who are just perfectly happy with being single, as well as those who are single now, but definitely hoping to be in a relationship at some time. So we try to expand the gamut there, and God always gives us what we need to do that. This ministry also hosts an annual trip each year to New York. I always say that God kind of plays a trick on us. He disguises it as a shopping trip, and we travel to New York on a bus. And he's just up and down the aisle, just doing some wonderful things for the ladies on the bus, some healing and some encouragement, some restoration. We have some wonderful devotionals on the bus. This year, our trip will be July 26th and 27th. Okay. And we leave here, we go to Philadelphia, spend the night, and then we get up on Saturday morning and go to New York. But we have some really inspirational devotionals on the bus. And the thing this year is called the Treasure Trip. Oh. And I have some surprises in store that I haven't even told our ministry team about yet.
Wow.
So they're excited and kind of concerned because I always have some things up my sleeve, but I'm very excited about it.
So do you ever get any of the guys that go on the trip, or it's just all women?
You know what, this New York trip has been, the very first trip was co-ed. We did have men, but then from that point on, for the following 7 years, it's been all women.
It's been all women.
Yeah,
so
it's been all women.
That's a good sisterhood.
It is a wonderful sisterhood, a wonderful time of fellowship,
right.
A wonderful time of meeting new friends, getting to know better the friends that you already have. Right. So it's been good. It's been good in many ways. So.
Well, you know, you bring up something that is a part of one of the subject areas that I'd like to touch today, and that's about friendship. There is so much going on today with the pressures of finance and family issues and health challenges, employment issues, marital challenges, you know, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. Sometimes people just need a real good friend.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I'm all for friendship, and it's funny. I was sharing with some other friends of mine actually that I think that as we have these birthdays, the notion of friendship becomes even more important. I think that friendship is kind of sandwiched at the beginning and near the end. In the beginning, middle school kids, it's all about validation and friendship, you know, and that peer pressure. And then you get in your 20s, your 30s, maybe the early part of your 40s, you're like, I got this, I don't really need anybody, I think I'm okay. But then as you get into that other season, you realize the importance of having other people around you to encourage you, to support you, to push you a little closer toward your purpose. Many times as we get, you know, as those seasons of life move along, life can present you with some challenges, either health challenges or loss of loved ones, and you need someone that can take your hand and say, we can work this out together.
Together, that's right. And you know, sometimes you know, you're married and you know your husband is right there for you, and that's one of your best friends.
Exactly.
But sometimes men don't understand that you need a girl. I mean, you gotta have that sisterhood there. I mean, what would you advise someone who is maybe going through that, where the husband is a little jealous jealous because he doesn't understand why you have to have anybody else other than him. He just doesn't understand that.
Yeah, and that can be tough. That can be tough. Jim and I, we always talk about friendship, and because there was a time when I was a little bit of a loner, he would encourage me, go out and meet some people, and I'm like, no, I'm okay. But I took his advice, and I'm glad that I did, because it's kind of broadened my horizons. And I think that in getting to be around other people, I think it's also helped to make me a better person in his life as well. So I think that overall most men will understand that importance that we have for having those friendships, that the husband is important and he can be the best friend, but there is that need, I think especially for women, to have that circle of friends. So I would say just, I'm a member of a sorority. I have the people at church, I have the sorority people, the people at church, the people in my family. I have 3 older sisters, and we're very, all women, we're very close friends. I have my daughter as well. So God has kind of given me some friendships on various levels, as well as the people that work with us in our ministry. And I think the important thing to understand in terms of finding friends is that not all friends will serve the same purpose in our lives. And that was a lesson I had to learn probably the hard way. I thought that you get a friend and that person is with you to death do you part. And not always the case, and not always even through thick and thin. And I've also found that sometimes when we go through challenges in life, we get upset when people that we thought should have walked with us in that valley are not there to walk with us. And what God showed me, especially last year when I was having some challenges when I fell off the horse and it took me all year to recover, God showed me don't be upset with the people that didn't reach out to you. There are times that God is very strategic, I've found, at least in my life, and I'm sure in the lives of others as well. He knows when and how and where and who. And so he knew at that time exactly who I needed to be in my life. And so I do believe that there are people who wanted to reach out who he just said, no, you just hold back. I got somebody else who's going to fill that slot. And so when I came to realize that, I kind of released some concern I had about where were you when I needed you? That internal thing we said when we think, didn't you know I was hurting? And you didn't call me and you didn't. But God said, no. I am sovereign. I am in control. I am working this out.
He's a friend of friends.
He is a friend of friends. He is a friend of all friends. And what he showed me too was that even when it was just me and God and the dog, he was like, what more do you really need? It was just kind of me there at the house by myself recovering. And it was a time for me to go in a place with God that I probably hadn't been in a long time. And so people who probably wanted to call, he didn't need them to call because I needed to really just hear from him for a time. And yet on the other hand, there were other people who reached out that I would not have thought would have reached out.
And so they were there for you. How do you handle situations? Because you mentioned earlier that sometimes you think the person is a friend and they're with you for everything that comes up, and they're not. But how do you differentiate between what is a true friend and what is not a true friend? How do you get that perfect circle of friendship, or can you?
Well, I think the operative word there is perfect. And there is no perfect circle because there are just no perfect people. And something else I had to learn the hard way. I thought, okay, if you're my friend, that means you're not going to talk about me, you're not going to do this. And I like to think that, but yet there are people who, have done or said some things that were hurtful. And what God showed me is that it's kind of like when Jesus walked the earth, he had the masses, and then he had the 12, and then he had the 3, and then he had the Father. And so I look at friendship as these kind of concentric circles. And as we have this big circle of people that we just we know them, they know us, but they don't know us intimately. And then those circles start to move in. And as you get closer, there are these people that God has purpose and has pointed us toward that will be the kind of friend that he's told us to be, that he's told us that we need to have. So I found that now I only want the people in my life that I know that God has put there.
So how do you know that? How do you know that this person is really someone that God has put there?
I think for me, it's been a situation of time and situations, conditions in my life. Over time, I always say, over time, everyone's true colors will come out.
Right.
And so I don't think that friendship is necessarily something that can happen quickly, although God can make it happen as fast or as slowly as he ordains it to be.
Right.
But for the most part, I believe that friendship takes time. It's something that kind of evolves over times and seasons and situations. And then I also remind myself too, when I've reached out to people and it was not maybe the best choice for me, I recall that I bring back to my mind that even Christ, who was divine and who was all-knowing, he had Judas in his mix.
Yes, he did.
And Judas played an important role in his life. And so for the people that have been in my life that I thought, well, okay, maybe I should not have had them in my life, maybe they've said some things or done some things, I come to realize that even in the hurt that they may have caused, that it was a part of a purpose. And so it helped me to now know, okay, I don't need to be that kind of friend to someone else. So if Christ had Judas, then I figure along the way, at some point, I may, have a Judas in my life as well.
Right. Well, what about situations where, at one time you were not saved, and then you gave your life to Christ.
Right.
And you had friends, pre and after. So were there people that once you made a change in your life and they saw that you were sold out on Christ, that there were changes a little bit, or were you able to maintain friends from way back when?
For me, I just kind of am who I am. So even after I accepted Christ, there were obvious changes in my life in terms of choices. Supposedly we should make better choices once we have Christ in our life. And so I used that new change in me to try to draw those people who were in my life before Christ, to draw them to Christ with no pressure, just by trying to be an example. And so I just let God do the weeding and the pruning.
Okay.
I didn't say, I can't be your friend now because I'm saved.
Right.
I just let God deal with that.
Right.
And so he just called me to be who I needed to be in him, and I just let him do the pruning.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. And I know what you're talking about, because that happened for me after certain people didn't think that I was really serious.
Yeah.
But then when they saw that I was, a clothing changed, the makeup and all the different types of things changed, there was a weeding out process, and there were some people that, they just weren't there anymore, for you, and you just had to move on.
You had to move on.
You just had to move on.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we're going to take a short station break, so don't touch that dial. We'll be right back with Dr. Negleatha Johnson, founder of Life Waters Ministries International.
You're watching In the Cool of the Day, where you can always get your praise on.
Thank you for watching In the Cool of the Day. I'm your host, Tia Young, with our special guest, Dr. Negleatha Johnson. I want to go to a different subject now. This has to do with dreams and visions. There are tons of people that I speak to, and they tell me, they said, I've had this dream, I've had this vision. I know the Lord told me this, but it does, nothing seems to be moving. Did I miss him? Or do I just stand and know that he is God and just wait to see, what happens, or to have him give you something more concrete to let you know that maybe you did miss him? How do you minister to people that feel that way and that they're disappointed and disillusioned because they don't see anything happening in what they really believe in their heart that they saw?
Well, first of all, we have to know that there are seasons, that God has a perfect time. To everything there is a season. There's a season for him to give us a word of hope or dreams or things that will happen in the future. And then there's a time for those things to actually come to pass. There are things that I recall very specifically God speaking a word to me. It must have been probably 2002, 11 years ago. And I was just thinking the other day, I was like, well, God, I'm still waiting for that to come to pass. But because it hasn't, doesn't mean that it won't. And if I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is, in fact, what God spoke, then I have to trust that his word will not return void. And I have to also know, and this is what God spoke to me, is that from 2002 to now, in order for that word to come to pass, there are things that I need to do. for me to get ready for that word that he spoke to me. And I think there are many times when God will speak. I've had people to say, God spoke to me and said that he's going to give me a husband, and they're waiting, and a couple of years pass. And so I think what we forget, or what we're not maybe mindful of, is that God can give us a word, but he also wants to prepare us for that blessing, or for whatever that is that he's spoken into our lives. And most of us don't want that meantime, that in-between period. We just want to hear it, and then we just want the husband, or we want to hear it and we want the whatever it is, the international ministry. But God is so strategic. He's so strategic. Whatever I have found for me, whatever he speaks to me is going to bless so much more than me. And so in the meantime, he's doing things in me that will bless me and prepare me for that word, but also it's going to bless other people as well. So I have learned, and I am learning, to be patient and to wait.
Just to wait on
and
him.
to serve.
Right.
And to know, and to not to try to manipulate the situation.
Yeah, that's important. That is important.
Many times we get that word and we're like, well, God, you said it, let me help you. He doesn't need our help.
Right.
He doesn't need our help.
That's right.
He doesn't need our help.
Well, I'm thinking that, sometimes people have honestly gotten ahead of God. I mean, they really thought they were doing what he wanted him to do at that time. And then they find out that, I should have waited.
Right.
Is there any hope for that person? Can they repent and ask God to forgive them and help them out that situation and turn it around?
Most definitely.
You
I
know?
mean, we serve a very gracious God. And thank God that he's merciful. And he recognized and knew that he created humans. He created us out of the dust. And he knew the frailty, in which we exist. And so his mercy covers those mistakes. I mean, and he's like, okay. And he already knew we were going to make the mistake anyway. And so it goes back to when God speaks that word, and the word doesn't take place until over here, he knew that in the meantime that we were going to try to help him out in some cases. And in many cases, that still doesn't change what's going to happen here.
Right.
Particularly if we turn around and say, God, I got ahead of you. Right. I try to do this thing myself. A good example is Abraham and Sarah. Sarah tried to help God. God spoke to her and told her what was going to happen.
Right.
But she was like, you're taking too long. Let me help you. But it didn't change what God promised her.
Right.
She did give birth to Isaac.
Right.
And all those things that God promised went on to pass.
But all that stuff in between.
Right. Now, the problem is when we help God, we run into some problems.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because she had to deal with Hagar and Ishmael. Right. And all of that, and the jealousy and all of that, or whatever, that might not have happened had she just waited and let God do what he needed to do. But God was gracious. He still honored what he said.
Right. So the repentance is important. The waiting is just waiting.
Right.
If you know in your heart and you just believe that God has told you to something,
exactly.
You wait. But while you're waiting, you're busy about doing what you can do.
What you can do.
What you can do.
What you can do, right?
Yeah.
And you're hearing from God to see how do I better prepare myself for this blessing that you've spoken into my life.
Right. Well, life hurdles are coming at people, as I said early, in monumental ways.
Right.
For every unresolved challenge that you have, 3 or 4 more
right.
will pop up out of the blue. People are overburdened, they're overwhelmed, and I say sometimes even overchurched.
Yeah.
I can remember situations of where, I saw single women in church almost every night with their little ones sleep in the back, and they're out till 1 and 2 in the morning, and sometimes it's just hard, and the scriptures for some people are not very clear. What would you say to people that are just overburdened and just overwhelmed, and they don't know where to turn, or they don't know how to turn? And some people are Christians. Some people have confessed Christ, as their Savior, but they still just don't know what to do. How would you minister to them?
Well, again, I think sometimes we feel that because we are Christians that we don't go through those periods of confusion or doubt or fear. Right. I would gather to say that with the events 2 weeks ago in Boston with the bombing, it terrorized everybody. saved and unsaved alike. But we have to remember all of those scriptures that God has given us on fear. That he has not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. And I really feel that this is a time for us to go deeper into the word and to cover ourselves in the cool of the day with scriptures that will encourage our hearts. There are many things that are pulling at our young people, that are pulling at our marriages.
That's true.
People are afraid to go. I mean, I pray that Boston continues to recover, and I'm sure that it will. There are many people praying for it. But there were things that just happened, I think, yesterday at a Catholic church in Albuquerque, where someone went in and started to stab, I think, the choir director. So people now are afraid to even go to church. Yes. So it's a time, I think, that the enemy is using to terrorize the saved and the unsaved. But as the called out of God, as the remnant, the unsaved folk have to see that in this difficult time, that yes, we are human and we may have fear, but that we turn and we go toward the rock, which is Christ. And that we don't turn to substance abuse or chemicals or alcohol or domestic violence, but we turn to our hope, which is Christ.
Right. Well, the other thing I would ask, and this is just from your heart, what has God been dealing with you about that you could share with the people? And it doesn't have to be in the realm of what we've talked about. It's just I'm sensing that there's some things that he has really been dealing with you about. We've got about 5 minutes.
Yeah,
so, you can have those.
No doubt. Most definitely. That's a great question, and I'm glad that you asked that. For me, it is a place of trust. Like I said, we've talked about that whole thing last year with falling off the horse.
Right.
And I had to trust God in a way that was maybe new for me. It was a dark place. It was a lonely place, even with loving family members and a few friends or whatever. It was a difficult place. And I had to trust that all of what happened to me was meant for my good and not for my harm, even though I felt that it did harm me and it did hurt. And there are some pieces that I'm still recovering from now.
When you say hurt, you mean emotionally or
hurt
physically,
emotionally
or both?
and physically?
Both.
Okay. Both.
Okay.
And I had to really dig deep to see how Romans 8:28 was working in that situation that said all things work together for good for those that love God and are called according to his purpose. It was hard for me to see any good in that situation. And I had to go into, some deep places with God to encourage myself so that I would learn to trust him in this and to know that even in that difficulty, that something good was going to come out of it. Even now, there's some other physical things that I'm dealing with. I had a biopsy the other day, 2 weeks ago actually, and which I thought was going to determine what my situation was, but the doctor was like, we don't know, and they were flabbergasted. And I was a little angry about that because I thought, you need to know what's happening since I agreed to have the biopsy. But God reminded me, he said, you got to trust me in this. I will show you what you need to do. And he had to remind me that he is sovereign, that he is in control. That doesn't say that, and that's not to say that when we are ill that we don't go to the doctor.
Right.
We use
wisdom.
We use wisdom.
Right. We use wisdom.
But he had to remind me, the people. He said, I am the creator, and my creatures don't know everything, and so I'm in that place now of just daily having to renew my trust. God, I need you. I need you to help me with this pain. Help me, this physical pain. Help me to understand that you are not going to leave me. So I'm in a place of trusting God and at a level, it's like each year the level goes deeper and deeper. And in the end, though, I realize just how good God really is. And I know that the enemy wants to get me in a place where it's like, you know what? This is too hard. Just forget it. But God's presence and his power and his spirit surrounding me lets me know that he is with me.
And you mentioned the enemy. And the enemy can be so subtle.
Very subtle.
What subtle ways? I mean, sometimes he comes at you through other people.
Right.
Just.
For me, it's just my more so for me, it's just my own thoughts. The enemy in me,
right.
in terms of me telling myself, I don't know. I don't know how this is gonna. I don't know if you're gonna come out of this okay. You know, those things that he tells us to tell ourselves, and we forget that the enemy is the father of lies.
Yes.
And so
yes.
I have to be like, no, I know what God spoke to me. You know, I know that He spoke to me in Psalm 118. 17 years ago, and said, "You shall live and not die, and declare the works of the Lord."
Of the Lord. That's a beautiful passage.
Isn't that a wonderful passage?
That is a beautiful
and I have
passage.
to draw on that
Every
and
day.
Daily, all day,
I
all
think
day.
that's important to know that
Yeah.
you can't just say something one time.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to continue to
Exactly.
encourage yourself.
Exactly.
In the word.
In the word
of the Lord.
Exactly.
That's right. Well, time really flies by when something interesting is going on. So I want to thank Dr. Johnson for sharing her heart with us today. If you don't take anything else away from this show, remember that friendship is important.
Yes, it is.
That we should never take it lightly. It is time to seriously think about the circle of real friends that you have, knowing that God is your number one friend.
That's right.
Someone who tears you down, never has anything positive to say, always trying to embarrass you or expose your weak points to others is not your friend.
That's right.
Think on these things. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please email me at inthecooloftheday2013@gmail.com. If you have questions for Dr. Johnson, please take note of her information on your television screen. Thank you for watching In the Cool of the Day.